your older brother, Yoni. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
Yoni.
Yeah.
In 1976, he leads the Operation Entebbe, which an astonishing operation, which Israelis leave Israel, fly to Uganda, and free more than 200 hostages from a plane that terrorists had hijacked. One soldier dies in the operation, and it is your older brother. This is from a letter Yoni wrote to your other sibling, your younger brother, Ido, on Ido's 12th birthday, as quoted in my story. Just as father offers me advice, writes your brother, your big brother, let me suggest something to you, he writes to your little brother. Learning is important above all else. The desire to study and acquire knowledge, to solve problems, to read and understand, these are the things that make a man great. Okay, the first thing to be said about this is a remarkable letter for a big brother to write to his baby brother on his 12th birthday. But the other thing that strikes me is read, acquire knowledge, but solve problems. That you were not raised to be a dreamer. Your father, your older brother were interested in practical knowledge, in solving problems. Have I got that right?
Yes, but you actually should conflate that with the idea of learning, because before I became prime minister, I asked my father, who was truly a great historian, and totally independent.
And lived to the age of 102, is that
102, and he was pretty, I would say that at the age of 100, he gave a speech which is amazing, 3 minutes, after being feted by, all these intellectuals and all these well-wishers, and he came up to the stage at 100, no help, just came in. And he said, well, it's all very kind of you, all the kind things you said, but I'll limit, time is precious, so I'll limit my remarks. We have to stop Iran. That's how we safeguard Jewish history. Thank you very much. I'm more bored. So he was very alert and acute intellectually until the end of his days. But I asked him, before I became prime minister, he said, first of all, you sure you can do this? That is, get elected? I said, yeah, I think I can be. And he said, well, maybe so, but once you get in, the left will do everything to get you out. I said, well, we'll see. By the way, he was right on that.
He was right about that, yeah.
So, but then I asked him a question. I said, Father, Abba, what do you think is the most important quality that the Prime Minister of Israel should have? And he shot back and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, I think you have to have a vision of where you want to lead the country. You have to have the resolve to pursue that vision, but also the flexibility to navigate around the shoals and turbulence of political life.
Pretty good answer.
Yeah. And he said, well, it wasn't good for him. He said that's something anybody who leads any organization needs, whether you're a dean of a university or a head of a company or even a military leader. It's the same answer. So I said, all right, so what do you think is the answer, Father? And he thought for a minute and he said one word that absolutely floored me. He said, education. You need a very broad and deep education. Otherwise, you'll be at the mercy of your clerks. That's what he said. And you have to be able to not to be at the mercy of your clerks, to take expert opinion, but ultimately to chart your course. You need a broad and deep education.
Okay. So let's take...
And by the way, just to add to that,
please.
So many years later, I'm visited by someone you're familiar with, Dan Rather, the journalist. He comes with his grandson to visit me a few years ago, and his grandson is in Dartmouth, which I think you went to, right?
I went to Dartmouth,
yeah,
that's
okay,
right.
So he's going to Dartmouth, and grandson is 18 years old, and he's thinking apparently of entering one-day politics, and he asks me now the question I asked my father. He asked me, so I described this in the book, he asked me, so what is the most important thing that I have to study in order to prepare myself to be in political life, to be a leader? And I said, well, actually, there are 3 things you should study. You should study everything, economics, military matters, whatever, all these other things, technology. But I said, you have to study 3 things: history, history, and history. And so in terms of learning what Yoni was talking about, my father broadened it into the larger understanding that you have to be broadly and deeply educated in order to be able to decide what is truly important and what is not.
All right. Free markets. Let's take this as a case study in the kind of education that permits a man to stand up to popular, conventional wisdom. Let's put it that way. So, two quotations here. Here's an author called Charles Duntz. Socialist politics were the dominant force of the modern Jewish state in its first 3 decades. Of course they were. The state was founded by good socialists. Israel was once a beacon of successful, that's his word, successful socialism, in which the paradigmatic building block was the kibbutz, the utopian commune. Here's the second quotation. It's Bibi Netanyahu in this book, writing about his time as a student at MIT. It began to dawn on me that what I was seeing in the Boston area was a winning combination: military intelligence, academia, and business clustered together and working in tandem. Of course, there was one critical component necessary for this model to work: free markets. Here you are, you're still a kid, a pretty accomplished kid because you've been to served for 5 years in the IDF, but you're a kid at MIT, and you are thinking thoughts that are at odds with the entire reigning ethos of the foundation of the State of Israel, and as the State of Israel continued through the early 2000s. Where did this come from?
Well, it certainly
what gave you the intellectual courage to think such, not only independent, but almost, in an ideological sense, almost treasonous thoughts?
Not treasonous, but certainly nonconformist.
Nonconformist, much better. All right.
Well, I describe one event that is crystallized. I pondered that too, and I asked, well, where did that come from? So in my early childhood memories, I describe an event that took place in our neighborhood. We lived in a private home, one of the few private homes. My father was the editor-in-chief of the Hebrew Encyclopedia, the equivalent of the Britannica.
We're in Jerusalem at this point.
Yes, we're in Jerusalem, and next to us is another private home that housed one of the greats, one of the, actually a very good man, who later became Prime Minister of Israel, Levi Eshkol. And one day, and I was 5 years old, standing in the porch of our home, overlooking Eshkol's home, and a caravan of cars, limousines, government cars, screeches into the neighborhood, stops before the home, and out come all these VIPs or government officials, whatever. And the whole neighborhood, the kids are rushing to see this sight. And my father walks out to the terrace, and I'm too small to even look because I'm not high enough to overcome the parapet, so to speak. And I see him standing there, and his hands like this, clenched behind his back, typical of him. And he looks down at them, and he utters one word: bureaucrats, and leaves. And it obviously made a deep impression on me. And it produced, I think, it was the genesis of a lifelong skepticism about bureaucracy and about government. But I certainly developed that in my time in the United States, in my years in the United States. I could see the difference between a free market economy and a controlled economy. And you don't have to be a genius to understand that one grows and the other contracts, or certainly doesn't grow as fast.